All right, hey folks. So we're back for part 2 of strength training misunderstandings. So let's get into it. Now, the first one of this video is this misconception, this myth that you have to be fat to be strong. Not true. Not true. So back when I was coming up, there was a phrase in sort of powerlifting circles, and it was gluttony is the last refuge of the weak. What that means is essentially getting fat is an almost guaranteed way of getting stronger. Now, I believe your training should be good enough to allow you to get stronger without getting fat. Now, I'm not talking about main gaining versus lean bulking, okay? Like, clearly bulking is going to be superior for faster results. But what I'm saying is some people would, and still do, purposely get fat or hold on to 20, 30 or more pounds of fairly useless tissue to enable them to see some better strength gains. I don't feel that's necessary. And I also feel that you can do a lot with keeping your body fat in range. Ultimately, I think that's a better way to go. You'll have longer longevity, better health. You'll probably feel less aches and pains. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, gluttony is the last refuge of the weak. So I don't like this idea that you have to just stuff yourself to gain, multiple pounds per month just to see strength increases. I think a good rate of weight gain is about 1% of body weight per month. So, a couple of pounds or less than that, great. But I think if you're gaining about a pound per week, it's far too much. And I think there are people out there who promote this idea of doing minimalistic training, followed by just stuffing yourself up to higher and higher body weights, which inevitably lead to just a ton of fat gain. Now, fat gain will get you stronger. It'll increase your leverages. But then it's a case of, well, why are you getting stronger? Are you getting stronger from your training, which you should be getting stronger from, or are you getting stronger just because you're physically a bigger person now? And we know from studies, if we're just force feeding ourselves full of food, a certain percentage of that is always going to be muscle, always. It's like natural sumo wrestlers. They are some of the most muscular, some of the most heavily muscled people on earth because they're just super fat. Now, we're not aiming for a sumo powerlifter type of build, and powerlifting has weight categories. So I feel like if you have to gain a ridiculous amount of weight just to put a few kilos on your lifts, you're doing it wrong. I think that you should be able to gain strength and mass with a reasonable surplus. I mean, a lot of times I think people can gain mass at maintenance. It's not as efficient, but it is definitely possible. So I think this misconception that you have to be fat to be strong, or even to be big or to get big, stems from people who just don't understand training, who just don't have very good training practices. Usually there are guys who do minimalistic routines. I mean, this was a really popular thing sort of 20 years ago when I first started training. Minimalistic routines and just stuffing yourself full of food. Routines where you'd be doing 4 sets or less per muscle group per week. And you just stuff yourself to higher and higher levels of strength. I mean, it was funny. You'd never see pictures of these guys. They would always have their training logs online with a little bit extra, strength every week. Body weight's going up. Feel great. So you get 250-pound guys benching 300 pounds thinking they're tough shit. So, but you never saw physique pictures of them. So, yeah, I just don't think it's a good strategy. I mean, one of the reasons I chose powerlifting over bodybuilding was that it has weight categories, I didn't want to get absolutely shredded when I first started training. And I also had a somewhat of a misconception that bodybuilding was the domain of like steroid users. So I kind of stayed clear of that. I mean, that's probably not true now, but 20 years ago, that was all I saw, just my experience. So I chose powerlifting. It seemed to be a much more user-friendly sport. But the advantage was, look, you've got weight categories. So you can be whatever weight you like. You don't have to stuff yourself to be a super heavyweight. So, and I'd just say with the education we have now in regards to bodybuilding, I think we know that effective training is enough to ensure that your muscles are growing. You don't have to stuff yourself full of food to induce a lot of unreasonable fat gain. Again, lean bulking, great. We're not discussing that. What I'm discussing is people gaining overly high amounts of fat just to get strong. I don't think that's a great idea at all. With the goal being, okay, I will diet it down later. It's a very risky strategy. I think you're playing with your health. Okay, the next thing is, misconception is that there is a natty limit. Now, this is a really interesting one because the strength standards have gone up considerably in the last 20 years. So when I first started training, my goals were to do a 3-plate bench, 4-plate squat, 5-plate deadlift. Now, for a lot of you guys, you'll think those are fairly moderate goals. I mean, they are going to be enough to, separate you from anyone in any gym most of the time, most gyms. But on the world of YouTube right now, those are fairly moderate goals. I mean, it just so happened I went on to lift a lot more than that, but the actual strength standards have gone up dramatically. And I mean, they've gone up in two different ways. Firstly, the overall records have gone up. So, I mean, the British powerlifting records in the confirmed drug-tested divisions are ridiculous right now. For a 200-pound guy, 93-kilo guy, the bench press record is almost 500 pounds. It's crazy, The squat records are just insane. Deadlift records are crazy. So, and this is in the drug-free, drug-tested, non-equipped, raw, just a belt type of divisions. So what's interesting is, while those records have gone up, what's gone up more is the general population level of strength. So it's generally accepted now that, sure, 3-plate aside bench is a good bench. It's a great bench. But a 4-plate aside bench is achievable. I have guys on the books who are going for a 4-plate aside bench and are relatively close. So, and these are just regular average guys. There's more of that now because I think it's down to the fact that there is, firstly, better training practices. I think we're seeing what's worked. If you've been around for long enough, you'll know that YouTube goes through phases. Not just YouTube, but fitness and strength and bodybuilding as a whole goes through phases. So I think about 10 to 12 years ago, there was a phase of really highly specific training. So people doing a lot of bench, squat, and deadlift week in, week out. About 5 years ago, there's a big focus on variations. And I think we're still sort of riding that wave. There's also been a focus on like various other things. And I think as we come through what tends to happen is we have a focus on something and the pendulum really swings one way. So everyone's doing, all the variations. I mean, for example, 10 years ago, if you weren't doing DUP and if it fits your macros with like protein shakes and Pop-Tarts, then you were a dinosaur. If 10 years ago you were doing a linear periodization with a meal plan, well, forget about it, dude, you are missing out. But I think what tends to happen is the strength and fitness community tends to latch onto an idea, push that idea fully, and then there's a reverse rebound of that. And I think we're seeing that now. The rebound from the sort of if it fits your macros crowd is to go more towards a nutrient-dense approach. And every time we make that step, we get closer and closer to the evolution of ideas. People can say, YouTube's going backwards, and it's not really. Like, trust me, it's not. 10 to 15 years ago, there was hardly anything out there, and the general level of information was not good. You look online now, and you look at some of the channels that you guys all watch, like myself and the other guys in that sort of sphere, the ones, I made a video about it recently. They're all promoting a lot of sensible, same stuff. And it's a combination of all the things that we've known to work over the last couple of decades. It's an evolution. We're not getting worse at all. We are getting better. And that's evident by the average guy on the street and girl on the street, in particular girls, especially girls, are way stronger than it would be 10, 20 years ago. There are always going to be outliers, but I'm talking about the average population level of strength has gone up 100%. 100%. Assuming they're interested in strength. I mean, the average person on the street is probably weaker than ever, but amongst our circle, I think the average lifter is definitely bigger and stronger, without a doubt, than they were 10, 15 years ago, especially for natty guys. So my point with this second point is, I do not feel anymore, or I don't feel we can confidently say there is a natty limit. I'll tell you this, guys, as well. When I first started training, I would have just killed to do a 4-plate aside squat. That was my goal, just a 4-plate aside squat. And I remember being sat in a car with my friend and his parents. My friend was a rugby player. His parents were really supportive, and they liked me because they knew I was a lifter. He lifted as well. And at the time, I was squatting about 350. And so I remember them talking about some guy who they knew on the rugby team who squatted 500. And his dad sort of turned around to me in the car while he was driving and said, "That'll be you soon, Faz." And I was like, "No, I can't do that. I'll be happy to get 400." And I think I said to him, I was like 22 years old at the time, or 21, and I said to him, "Look, I'd be happy with a 400 squat. Like that would be it." And he said, "No, you'll do way more than that." And so I didn't really believe it, but yeah, I mean, I hit 400, went on to hit 500, went on to lift more. So yeah, there's no reasonable limit to strength, really. I don't believe there is. The limits when it comes to the practical limits are time, age, and injuries. Start young, be consistent, don't get injured, and you'll do some good things. It's great. Like that works. With the level of knowledge we have on sort of bodybuilding fitness YouTube now, like you can go really far with that approach. So the second myth is that there is no reasonable natty limit anymore. And when I mean anymore, I mean that more of a psychological thing. Obviously, we haven't changed physiologically in 20 years, but I think our training practices are way, way ahead. And so when I encounter people who don't believe they can, bench 3 plates, squat 4 plates, or deadlift 5 plates, I'm just go, you guys know how I feel about that. It annoys me. And I did the video on strength standards a few months ago where people were arguing about a 3-plate bench. Like, come on. Don't put those limits on yourself, because it's not even a massive limit anymore. What we know from training, what we know about diet and everything else is way above and beyond that. Your sight should be set super high. Most young able-bodied men right now, starting at 20 or 18 or whatever, you should be targeting a 4-plate bench, really. Like, I'm not going to make a video on strength standards and tell people to do a 4-plate bench, because 3-plate is fantastic. But yeah, ultimately, that's what your goal should be. Finally, the final strength myth is that progressive overload is the way to build strength. Now, that is the way that I've said that is purposely a little bit controversial, simply because progressive overload, that is the ability to add weight to the bar week in, week out, or whatever, or month in, month out, is not the method of building strength. It is the demonstration that whatever you did got you stronger. Now, that is an extremely important point to remember. In evaluating your routines and whether you've gained strength or not, whether you're progressing or not, over the course of weeks and months, you have to bear that in mind. Now, let's say, for example, you're an intermediate and you can gain some strength week to week. Okay, great. Now, assuming you add a kilo to the bar from one week to the next, what that means is what you did in the previous week allowed you to get stronger. So that's very important to remember. Like, I've known friends of mine who've said, I overtrained. I overtrained on that routine. It was really hard. I overtrained. And then I asked them, did you gain strength? Did you gain size? Like, yeah, I did. So you could add weight to the bar. Yep, I could. But you saying you overtrained? Well, you clearly didn't. You adapted to the workload, and it's evident by the result being progressive overload. You were able to add weight to the bar. People tend to mistake this. Progressive overload, it tends to be sort of scapegoated into a low volume, high intensity style of routine, like a Dorian Yates style of thing. Because Dorian said it all the time, progressive overload is a key to size. It's not. It is the demonstration that what you did worked. What you did was your training last week, whether it was 10 sets per body part per week, whether it was 20 sets, whether it was going to failure, whether it wasn't, whether it was a 4-day split, whether it was a 6-day split. That's what you did. The progressive overload element is the result of your training. It is not your training. So if somebody asks, well, what do you think about the progressive overload approach? What are you talking about specifically? Because as long as your training is working, whether it's high volume, low volume, to failure, not to failure, whether it's working or not, if it's working, it means you are able to demonstrate progressive overload. It's a key point to understand. If you don't understand that point, what you'll be constantly sort of stuck in with is an inability to evaluate your previous training. If you cannot demonstrate progressive overload on a regular basis, you have to look at the training method which led you to that point and adapt that. If you just synonymize progressive overload with low volume, high intensity training, you'll never be able to objectively evaluate that. And you'll be stuck in this loop which says that that's my training style. even if you need more volume, less failure, whatever else. You just need to be open to evaluating your training, because progressive overload is a demonstration you got stronger. It is not the method. And it's important to remember that so you can evaluate your own training. All right, folks, I'll call it there. I think that's long enough for this video. Hopefully that was interesting, and I'll speak to you guys in the next one. Take care.